Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another new entry here. This one not necessarily based on a new suggestion, but rather on something that I picked there on my last membership video. Those of you that were in my membership and saw this happen, you saw me go to my favorite UFO website ever, the UFO Casebook site, and there just randomly I found this entry here. I looked at the information associated with it, and I thought, what a great way to share this new info, this new case with everyone here. So if you haven't had a chance to join my membership, check out the link below. You'll be able to do so and then see essentially how I was able to do this and other videos. But it has to do with a strange case of a vanishing UFO somewhere there in France with multiple witnesses and a very interesting visitor. This could be a visitor that was an alien or could actually be a robot of some sort, maybe something along those lines. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. And it's the vanishing UFO in France. So I'd love to give my own thoughts and opinions on it afterward, but I'd love to hear what your own thoughts are as well. Especially those of you that I'm about to say the location of, let me know on the local level too. So here's essentially what happened. You have to go back to September 30th, 1954. This was at 4:30 p.m. no less, so out there in the middle of the day, nothing obstructing things like in terms of nighttime. And it was specifically there at an area in France called Indre-et-Loire. Hope I'm saying that correctly. Indre-et-Loire. So those of you that know that location, you might know exactly what I'm talking about. But it was on that fateful day that there was a guy who was a foreman of a construction crew who came across a strange visitation. He saw it and some of his other members saw it, and here's what happened. So at that time period of 4:30 p.m., the foreman was a guy by the name of George Gattei. He was someone that was heading an 8-man construction crew. He was just there doing his normal job. I imagine the rest of the people there were also just busying here and there with regards to their normal 8 or 10 hour workday, when all of a sudden George stated that he was unexpectedly drawn away. He almost got a sense that he should be heading somewhere. He described it, in fact, as a quote-unquote peculiar drowsiness. And so as he was walking away from the construction site, probably to the strange bemusement of some of the other co-workers, wondering, what's the foreman doing? Why is he going over there? He went across a slope or an area nearby a slope, and all of a sudden he saw something like this. The first thing that caught his mind was the actual quote-unquote visitor. This was someone that was a man-like being that was apparently the size of a man, had the appendages, like in other words, 2 arms, 2 legs, a chest, and then a head, if you could even call it that. And it was standing there wearing these gray coveralls and these very short boots. But what was interesting was several things about this quote-unquote man. There was the idea that in one of their hands, this visitor had what looked like a rod. It was a rod that could have been a weapon or it could have been an electronic instrument. Either way, though, George Gattei described it as it was in his hand, and it was also almost like, I don't know if it was illuminated or if it was something else shining off of it. I got the impression that this could be like almost like a lightsaber. Like that's the kind of rod that it was and the way it was actually being illuminated. That would be the first impression on my end. But then also this weird visitor also had this. Instead of a face, it had a helmet. This helmet was completely opaque and it had a very large visor to it. The impression I got on this was the Spider-Man villain, Mysterio. You know what I'm talking about, right? The guy with that large fishbowl helmet. That's the impression that I got with what this creature was also wearing. And then on top of that, it had across its chest a bunch of electronic instruments. It was almost like a display. And so this man, if you could even call it that again, was just standing there, like it was almost waiting for George Gattei to cross over that slope. It was there, it was watching him, and then it in turn just stood there as George in turn was standing there, as he described it, both enthralled and paralyzed and frozen in his tracks. But what he saw behind this creature was something else entirely different. In fact, this is what he saw. He described a device or some other type of dome-shaped object, for lack of a better term, a UFO, behind this creature. It was there, it was hovering, it was about 3 feet above the ground, and the way that George Takei described it was almost like a cupola with blade-like devices right on top of it. That's all it was doing. It was just standing there, and then it was just hovering and doing nothing else with regards to it. So the foreman was there, George Takei, standing. This visitor was there just standing. And in fact, here's how he describes what happens next. He said, "Suddenly, the strange man vanished, and I couldn't explain how he did it since he did not disappear from my field of vision by walking away, but vanished like an image one erases. Then I heard a strong whistling sound which drowned out the noise of our excavators, and soon the object rose by successive jerks in a vertical direction, and then it too was erased in a sort of blue haze, as if by a miracle." So the way he described it was, all of a sudden, this visitor was there 1 second, and the next second it was gone. It was almost as if it was completely wiped from the screen. Whatever that he was watching at that time, it was gone from his field of vision. And then at that very same moment, presumably when that happened, this creature teleported over to that UFO. This UFO started to rise, but he described it as almost in a jerk-like fashion, like in a quick stop-and-go type motion. And then as it went up into an area that was more on the lines of a blue haze, it in turn disappeared within that blue haze. Who knows if it also teleported elsewhere or just outright disappeared or had some form of camouflage. Who knows? But then it was gone. And so he stood there for a little bit longer, just again paralyzed after seeing this being and this object behind it. And then all of a sudden he snapped out of it. He went back to his co-workers, asked all 7 of them if they in turn saw this thing. They said yes. In fact, one of them said, they exclaimed almost in an excited manner, "Yes, I saw it. It was a flying saucer." And then he noted that some of those coworkers, if not all of them, were also in a daze. Like it was almost like this thing, whatever it was, this visitor and the UFO, had in turn encapsulated the entire area in some form of, I don't know, mental fog, something like that. Or whatever was affecting that paralyzed motion, whatever was affecting George Takei, was apparently also affecting them. I don't know if from their vantage point they got to see it as crystal clear as George Takei did, but one got the impression that they still saw it, especially when it was flying upwards. And then one of the other men, an excavator driver by the name of Mr. Lubinovich, stated that yes, he saw it. There was a man dressed like a diver right in front of it, meaning the UFO, and all of them confirmed that they had seen this event. Now, if you think that ended there, it did not. A little while later, for about at least a week, George Takei started to suffer some strange symptoms after this incident. In fact, the way it was described was, it was almost like he was in a form of insomnia, along with having some strong headaches, and then also having a loss of appetite. This was someone who had apparently gained some great credibility, not just in his job, but also in the community. And so this is important because when he in turn, I guess, either started to tell other people with regards to it, or other people were asking him, they knew that he was someone that wouldn't just make this stuff up. He was a well-respected man. He was a well-known man around that area. He had fought, in fact, in the French Resistance. So people knew that when he was there, he was fighting for his life and fighting for his country, to the point that he was wounded at an area called Luxembourg. He was not somebody that was prone to just make things up. And so when he gave that explanation, even with as much detail as possible, nobody was really batting an eye towards it. They just actually accepted it as is. But then that was it. Other than those symptoms that occurred afterward to him, and then presumably to some of his men as well, there was no other encounter. Once this UFO there vanished in France, in that area there in France, there was no other sightings linked to it. Very interesting stuff. No, as far as a unique visitor or alien or gray or whatever you could call it. This is a first. Something involving a creature that looks like Mysterio slash a diver slash something else. And then to this day, having all these electrical equipments, the idea is, was it truly an entity? Something that was a UFO slash gray, or was it actually a robot? Something that was being controlled, maybe even from the actual UFO itself. And then when it was quote unquote caught, and then all of a sudden it disappeared and vanished. That's what caused it to leave. So who knows? But at least there's a lot of questions still to this day. But the good news is, with the men who saw it, and especially the foreman associated with it, there was a lot of people that know that this, what was done and what happened and what they claimed occurred, is correct. Like, there's very little doubt as to what they were doing, and if there was anything involving falseness. No, they absolutely believe that that occurred. But let me know what you guys and gals think about this very interesting story, not to mention the fact that they had almost like a lightsaber in their hand. Let me know about that location. If anybody has more info on the local level, I'd love to hear about it. All right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.